Hi guys, we'll continue with Unit 4 of Qualitative Research Design and Data Analysis, LSP510/03. Unit 4 will be on Qualitative Data Analysis. So we'll go through two main essential components of data analysis. So firstly is actually transcription. Then we will actually talk about one of the most popular data analysis method in qualitative research, which is thematic analysis. So qualitative transcription. Transcription itself refers to how you transform information from like spoken form into written language. It could be from audio or video format. Remember recording we talk about in Unit 3, yeah, into a record of written language. Now, most beginner will ask the question like, why do we actually need to do it? Would not just the recording suffice? After all, written is most inferior to video and audio, right? Like when you actually transcribe written words into when you transcribe spoken word into written form, you lost things, paralinguistic features like pitch, volume, pace characteristics, whether the fast or slow, all those things are gone. Yeah, so wouldn't video and audio better? But again, transcription is used almost exclusively or everywhere in any qualitative research. Okay, so what is the reason of people doing it? The main reason is that transcription is in written form, which means that you can actually compare them in real time side by side. Imagine trying to do it using audio or video. Let's leave video alone, just do it on audio. It will be a nightmare when you try to compare them. Yeah, on the other hand, transcript allow you to navigate quite effortlessly, back and forth, and then compare between people, compare between different time. All those things are much more flexible using a region transcription, and that is the reason why it's still being used today. Now, there are several types of transcription, mainly separated into two. Firstly is the orthographic, secretarial, place script, or most of us known as verbatim transcription. So this is where you just reproduce solely whatever the word is said, not how they are said. Yeah. So basically, you focus only on what words has been uttered by the participant or the respondents. Then this is the most common form of transcription. But in a lot of cases, it might not be sufficient for qualitative data analysis or qualitative research. That's why we introduced the Jeffersonian transcription. This is where, in addition to the verbatim transcription, we actually use some common keyboard symbols to provide additional information above the verbatim transcription. Yeah. So this is most suitable for analysis like conversation analysis and social constructionist discourse analysis, where you actually look at how conversation actually unravel, how people actually respond to different things. Again, you simply consider the pitch of something like absolutely versus absolutely. They are already totally different meaning. So you can see why Jeffersonian analysis can be quite essential. For those of you who experience this, I know you already feel like it's a bit too much, as it will show later, or you refer to table 4.1. It seems like there's a lot, but it's highly recommended that you actually learn it if the qualitative research is a path that you want to go down to. It requires a bit of training, but once you get used to the particular table or the list of symbol that you use, it would become almost second nature. It's not totally effortless, but it will not be as challenging as you imagine it will be. Yeah, so worth some put in some time for it. Another way that you look at type of transition would be whether how denaturalized is it. Also, this one will be on a continuum. Naturalized means that it's as close as the spoken language as possible, so including things like stuttering, pauses, pitch, volume, a change in volume, emphasis, all those things. So this is typical for conversation analysis. So you can see that Jeffersonian transcription is an attempt to create a naturalized transcription of the spoken language. On the other end, it will be denaturalized transition. So this will be the verbatim one, or the play script one, where they focus mainly on the word spoken only, don't care about all the paralinguistic features. Yeah. So this is something that would be typically used for grounded theory research, where you are testing a theory based on the word that's being uttered by the person. You don't really care about the conversation, you don't really care about how it actually goes on, the tone, what's the meaning, etc. It's more like semantic based. Yeah. So what is Jeffersonian transcription? This is an example, excerpt from table 4.1 that's being shared on LSM on your material. So by using an arrow, you can actually add extra information about pitch in spoken word lah, or transcribed word. So for example, absolutely, if you add a pitch increasing rising arrow here, it means that absolutely, yeah, where it actually indicates unexpectedly mildly higher pitch, or absolutely. So you actually go down the pitch where it actually signal different thing. Now even this, the meaning could be different depending on the context that you talk about. Simply saying that, oh, it's actually an increasing pitch doesn't necessarily means that the person is excited. It could be sarcastic and etc. So it provides you with extra meaning, but still interpreting them requires you to actually know the whole set of data, or what is the context at that time, in order to come up with the correct meaning for it. So give you an example of like a full some excerpt from a full Jeffersonian transcription. This is an example here. Again, the same thing has been shared in your learning material. So like this part is showing that Graham is the speaker for the first 3 lines. So without changing line means that it's the same speaker. Okay, so you can see the transcription is follow as much as possible the way that it's actually uttered, rather than like changing into the written language. You all know it's getting real serious. This is a brief measure pause in the speech. So this is measuring the pause here. Then it's a rise in pitch, but the lad keep getting away with it. So unfortunately, his mother hasn't got blocked there, so she's taking in. So here the bracket actually signaling that there's overlapping. Yeah, they are speaking together. Then this is from Louis starting to talk, and Louis continue here, but then Graham actually takes over the conversation. Okay, so again, like without stopping here rather than overlapping. So before Louis actually said the time is she, then straight away Graham actually take over. Okay, so that is an example of how Jeffersonian transcription is being used. Again, it seems like a bit daunting. There's so many things to learn if you look at table 4.1, but I promise you, if you actually put in some time and do some practice, it's going to be less daunting. Yeah, and again, remember, it's not a thing that you need to memorize. You basically add on information as you go. Now, doing Jeffersonian transcription is not an easy thing. Sorry, it's not a simple, straightforward. It's not a simple thing, although it's straightforward, but it do take quite a bit of effort. So 1 hour recording in average would take 10 to 24 hours of work, depending on how good you are, because you are basically repeating the transcription and then make sure that all the possible information are relevant information are added in, and you're not really wrong. Then here is the reason why I say that quantitative research can actually take quite a bit of effort and time, and not as simple as some of people will tell you. Okay, so given the amount of work that's involved, Jeffersonian transcription should only be used when it's actually the appropriate choice or suitable choice for your researcher, depending again on your research questions, on what you're actually testing. Even if you are decided to use it, you do not necessarily need to use the full list. You can adjust the amount of convention or the symbol that you want to use, depending on how much detail is required in order for you to actually interpret your data. Yeah, you do not have to crack your head to actually make the decision. You can refer to past studies, or actually ask researcher in the similar areas like your supervisor, etc., as to how much convention is required for a particular topic, or for the particular research area. So good Jeffersonian transcription do have several characteristics. So first of all, it sounds really contradictory, but yes, the principle of parsimony actually applies here. You want to keep the speech as simple as possible. Yeah, you only transcribe features that is meaningful. You do not need to go through the whole thing. If you think that it's not interesting, just focus on the quote or excerpt that is really essential for the research question that you're asking. Yeah, and keep it simple. The convention can be as much as you need. Only do not need to go full way out with. Okay, so keep the transcription and the report as simple as possible. Make sure that it's only focusing on things that will make the analysis intelligible. So things that will make it interesting, yeah, or things that are meaningful. Do not create a spurious impression of accuracy. Yeah, there's no such thing in transcription. Even if it's just verbatim transcription, yeah, you might not be actually accurate, because remember, you are not writing it out, the transcription. You are basically following more the sound as much as you can, something that we'll discuss later as well. So given that, you do not give an impression that you are actually accurate. There's actually a study by O'Connor and Cowell that found that transcribers of radio interviews tend to ignore a large majority of short passes when they're transcribing. And pauses, it could be that they feel like it's not important, or it could be that it just go over their head and they don't remember. So yeah, do not present your data as is perfect. Even with current computer technology, those of you who have started or trying on your CA2 would know lah, like automatic transcription is still not a perfect job. Look at MS Team. And after you've done this, of course, you want to check your transcription. You want to make sure that you do not make an error and you have put in the convention as intended. It's best to employ an independent checker to do this. So get someone else to do this, let it be like postgrad student, etc. Because with a fresh pair of eyes, they are more likely to actually detect if something is wrong and able to give you a chance to actually recover lah, or actually update the information unless, instead of waiting for error to happen and then something worse actually happen because of that. Now, what's the step in doing Jeffersonian transcription? Basically, is like not a lot. The first one, of course, you want to tune into recorded interaction before doing anything. Just listen to the recording. So repeatedly listen to them, make the decision as to, are you going to transcribe the whole thing, or there are only parts that you want to go for. If there's only part that you want to go for, decide on which part and mark down the time first on the recording lah, both video or audio. Okay, you want to decide what aspect are this, why are you focusing on it, because later when you're writing a report, this will be essential, a justification of how you actually run your transcription. Okay, make sure that you listen to a point where you have a general understanding of what is happening in the data, or like you already have an idea of what type of code or what type of theme actually emerge from it. You should make a best effort to identify each of the speaker. If you're doing a video recording, this will make it easier, of course. Yeah, and if you do this to MS Team, also MS Team will be able to tell you who the speaker is and share when they transcribe. I imagine Zoom will do the same. So having this platform make life easier lah. But then, as mentioned before, if you are doing it online, people might be more inhibited to talk. It's really hard to tell who is talking, who is engaging or not. Even if you turn on the camera, it is a challenge. So if you are able to do, if you have to have a choice, try to do it on face to face, and just use a good recording to actually do it. You can, okay. So you want to carry this out separately in terms of capturing the word or how they are being said. So again, you don't do Jeffersonian straight away. Yeah, first thing to do is always a rough transcription or verbatim transcription first. If possible, do it automatically. Put it through YouTube, put it to Word Recognize or something. Now there's apps that actually do it. If you have a good stereo or video recording, this would be really good. Like YouTube right now cannot actually transcribe audio file anymore, so can only transcribe video. You can record a video without the visual lah. So you just play the video recorder, let it run, let it work as an audio recording. Then you can actually put it to YouTube. Personally, I found that YouTube transcription is much more accurate compared to the MS Team one or other that I tried. Okay. So once you feel like you actually know the data quite well, then you can start doing rough transcription. Again, this is the verbatim transcription. Try to use LS to identify speaker, especially if it is a focus group. You don't want the identity to be identifiable later on. So transcribe the sound rather than the written word. Is a sama, is something, or year for you and your. Then you actually write year. Okay. Either you use conventional orthography, like the sound that you can generate using your keyboard, or you can use the phonetic spelling system lah. But phonetic spelling system will require some training. Again, if you do have the time and interested in this, I do recommend you to go ahead with it. Okay, but you have to bear in mind that reading phonetic spelling system also requires some sort of training and guidance. So you want to make sure that when you actually do it, it's not for your purpose, it's more for your reader. Yeah, and this is the best option. And you need to make sure that your reader audience actually understand what you're doing. Okay. You put any non-transcribable features in double bracket. For example, when someone clear throats or they are coughing, so it's double bracket. Yeah, so you are using somewhat Jeffersonian convention already lah. Yeah, remember capital are used for words spoken loudly, much like when we do it in WhatsApp or messaging last time. Okay, when audio recording is not yet a thing at that time, you do not use it for names. Like full capital lah. Yeah, so please just use it for word that's spoken loudly. Okay. You want to make clear that where there are any pauses or not, because later on you will need to add in the bracket and stop. So how do you lay out Jeffersonian transcription? Example was already shown just now lah. Just to lay out in words, you use the font that's proportional. So recommended would be like Korean 10 point size. Yeah. And you have line numbers beside it. Remember the example that we saw just now. Yeah. So it can be inserted automatically by word. You just follow the instruction lah. The line length are actually arbitrary. You can change or into different column, etc. as you prefer. Personally, I prefer to use Excel rather than Word for the initial transcription. It doesn't look as nice, but it's much easier on the eye, especially when I need to do coding or thematic coding, thematic analysis later on. It makes it much easier for me to add on column to the side. If I use it on Word, then it means I already need to put a side or a space for it, as I mentioned just now. But it depends on what you are familiar with lah. Okay, you can always transfer the information from one form to another form anyway. Yeah. The line numbers, if you are able to provide it, it will help you with identification of the sub. So next time you can know that, oh, this code is for what, this code is for what, simply by referring to the number, rather than saying that, oh, I need to actually go back to the keyword or search for the keyword. It will be problematic. So like it seems like a lot of work to do when you're planning to do this, but once you put it into a template, then yeah, it would offer you advantage or the easy pathway later on when you're actually running the most prominent, the most effortful or the most resource taking part where you are analyzing the data. Okay. So if you have different lines, also it provide you with flexibility or indicating overlapping speech. Remember the example that we talked about just now. Sorry, because I'm recording this through PowerPoint, it's really hard for me to go back and forth. Okay, so yeah, just look at the example given in the text to see it. Other than that, the margin should be just the default one, same for quantitative, qualitative. Yeah, you want to have code number for each of the extract. Ideally, you want to include some of the indicator of the source, like who speak it, under what condition. Yeah, speaker and contribution names should be in bold. Remember, try to use ls if possible. Try to leave some blank space on the right side of the text so that you can make note of it. Again, this one is when you do initial coding, you can actually put your code there. If you want to do it fully on computer, like I say, I would prefer to do it on Excel lah. It's just much more flexible that way. So that is the layout. So after you've done your rough transcription, then it comes to a time where you add in the Jeffersonian symbol. You can do it. You can take your time doing it. It's like it's not one go thing. It's a evolve thing. Okay, so you actually do it like going through the transcript again like several times. This is actually helpful for you when you need to analyze the data or coming out with the team later on, because the more familiar you are with the data, the easier is it, or the more meaningful is it, or the more meaning you can extract from it later on. Okay. So when you're adding in the Jeffersonian symbol, concentrate on the detailed sequencing of the conversation and not just on the word. Like again, I mentioned just now, what's the context here? Why increase of pitch would be important here? Why the pause here would be important? Why people are overlapping at that point? Yeah, so you want to note down all those contexts. Okay, include square bracket indicating overlapping again as shown in the example just now, because overlapping is meaningful in like discourse analysis and stuff. It shows that people are eager to share. It could be something that's really important to them, that's why they're eager to share, or they want to cut someone off, they are disagreeing with each other. So all those things will bring in quite meaningful information for the researcher. Now, when it comes to reading the transcript after you have done it, then you want to read it to check and make sure that you have done a good work or correct work. Yeah, you want to understand what has been said as well as how it is said if you are using a Jeffersonian transcript. So both should be in there. When you read it for the first time, you should, right from the start, you should already find that some parts are interesting. So those have a really clear meaning directed towards the topic that you are studying. It's not uncommon, because depending on the question that you ask, even particularly at the start, people will try to stay within topic and they will give you the answer that is most relevant to the question that you asked. Yeah, but those things might not be the most meaningful one. You might actually need to probe further into the data to find something that's not as obvious. Remember, if something can be found superficially, there's no point for you to run an analysis. Yeah, people can just simply go through the transcript and actually know everything that's to be known about it if you only focus on superficial meaning. So it actually makes sense or worth it for you to actually probe further to find out what is the underlying themes. Yeah, what is the person or respondent actually saying. Okay. You do not need to memorize all these things. Just follow the table 4.1 or any Jeffersonian transcription and list or guidance you can find online. Yeah, you can actually use any one of them. Yeah, you do want to choose a manageable section to transcribe first, and don't try to attempt to do it totally at one go. Some of you will be able to do it. Personally, I would say that it's quite a nightmare, especially if you attempt to complete the Jeffersonian transcript together. I would recommend you to follow this if you are decided to use Jeffersonian transcription, either like during the course or in your future. Now, when to use Jeffersonian transcript and when not to use it. So it is good because it actually approaches normal conversation as much as possible. Yeah, and that part provide you information extra from just the semantic that's being spoken. Okay. So analysis of conversational interaction would definitely require Jeffersonian system. Right? If not, then yeah, you basically just have a semantic one over protein transcript. It doesn't actually tell you how the conversation unraveled, how it was conducted, yeah, how it will change or challenge, etc. Okay, so even if the word is the focus, you still have more information. So remember, meaning could change depending on how words is actually spoken. So those could be essential. And that's the reason why Jeffersonian system have gained dominance over all the other methods, yeah, even over the verbatim comma transcript. If you are doing this for actual research purposes, it just gives you much more information. Okay, and by forcing the researcher to engage with it for more times, it actually helps them to understand them more and make it easier when you need to analyze the data later on. Remember, doing Jeffersonian transcription requires some training. You cannot just be someone else. But the secretariat one or verbatim transcription, you can actually do it automatically even nowadays. Okay. Please use line number if you are able to. There are actually template online that you can follow. Again, it's not something that you need to generate yourself. Just follow or whatever people share online. You try it. It seems to be valid. It seems to be something that is helpful. Go ahead and use it. Yeah. And of course, the same thing, if you actually have something that is helping you, you find it's really helpful, then do share it online, help others or juniors that is coming into the field. Yeah. Now, when not to actually use it, remember 1 hour of 1 hour recording is 10 to 24 hour of Jeffersonian transcription. If you do not need it, don't need to do it. If you are doing things like grounded research or you focus only on semantic themes, then maybe there's no point looking for the paralinguistic features. Yeah. Okay, so it is still restricted as much as we like, and as much as we like to see Jeffersonian system as an evolving system, there are still new convention being added in because of the context that we are in or time that we are in now. It is still providing less information than the actual spoken language. But the thing is that you do have the recording with you when you're running your analysis, so you are able to use it as a supplementary information. It does not have to be that I will want to follow the transcription. Yeah, just that the transcription again offer you with the flexibility of moving along, and it's much easier to be published rather than say that, oh, please follow this audio file for the code or the excerpt from the data itself. So just writing it out makes more sense at least still for now when you're publishing the information, yeah, or the findings. Now the system may be modified. A lot of people again have different type of idea of how Jeffersonian system should be. Even Jeffersonian itself is different. Table 4.1, by the way, is by the researcher, yeah, so by Jeffersonian himself. So you can actually follow that. But there are people who come out with variation of it. Any one of them is fine. As long as you make it clear to the reader which system are you following, then it should not actually affect the validity of the data. So some prefer to use more conventions, some prefer to use less. Okay, and still remember, it's really time consuming, and there is a disagreement about the value. Some people feel like it's not necessary, some people feel like it's essential. As I say, it doesn't matter. It's qualitative research. You feel like the paralinguistic feature is essential, please use it. It requires some time, but it will give you richer data in the sense. When remember, the focus of qualitative research or the key feature is to gain rich data. Yeah, but if the rich data, the extra rich side is not really relevant to what you're asking, then don't use it. There's no point. Yeah, you just put the effort in without any purpose. Okay, so that is the Jeffersonian transcription or transcription in general. Let's talk about thematic analysis. So thematic analysis, one of the most widely used qualitative analysis method today. especially in social sciences and psychology. But before like the contemporary time, it has been one of the most confused one or misunderstood method. Some thought that it's the same as content analysis, as we mentioned, is frequency analysis of word utter. Is actually not. Thematic analysis is quite opposite from that. um, you imagine the thematic analysis can like the actual or hallmark analysis method lah in qualitative research, particularly for psychology. Again, given that it's still a poorly demarcated, rarely acknowledged method, according to Brown and Karp, who is the person who model we will be talking about later on. I imagine since like 2006, it has been a good improvement or in terms of understanding of thematic analysis as well as the applications, yeah, in the field of psychology. So I feel like for now, for me as a researcher, is actually quite well defined what is it already. People are able to differentiate it from content analysis, which last time was actually confused between the two. Yeah. Now, it is the thing that I want to teach you in this course because it is considered as the foundational and generalizable core skill, and it will be applied across various forms of qualitative research method or analysis. Yeah, it doesn't matter what type of qualitative research that you are doing nowadays, team analysis would be involved in it. Yeah, because it has basically embodied the spirit or the spirit of qualitative research, which is extracting underlying information. Yeah. Okay, so you need to thematize the meaning and find out what is the actual thing that people are actually saying, or what is the underlying features that is determining all the all the responses by different respondents. So in order to understand that further, first let's talk about what is a theme. A theme is quite hard to define. Again, is qualitative research is considered as a substantial level of repeated responses. So that's why you can see how it's actually confused with content analysis or significant meaning of given data. And nowadays it's given more to the meaning rather than simple repetition. Yeah. So ideally, the team should capture the important information in relation to the research question. Again, there's no right or wrong method for doing this to determine whether something is important or not. All this depends on the interpretation of the researcher. So the researcher, because of this, should remain flexible. Yeah, do not have any rigid rule, like it has to be mentioned more than 5 times, etc. What if it's only mentioned once, but a lot of people elaborate on the topic itself? Yeah, then it could mean that it's actually really important, but it just turns out by chance that the word has been uttered only once. Okay? So you do want to remain flexible at first lah. Okay, so regardless, the representation of prevalence should be clearly defined. It does not have to do it at the start. So at the start, you can be quite flexible as to thinking, okay, this is interesting, I want to include that. But at the end, when you finish your analysis or when you're actually running your analysis, you want to be quite clear what is considered as a key theme or what is considered as a theme, what's the criteria. Yeah. Again, even saying that qualitative research is flexible is not like a wild west where you can do anything as you desire. Yeah. So there are several types way to actually look at thematic analysis of what type of themes that you are looking at lah. First is the comparison between inductive versus deductive thematic analysis. So inductive is data driven, meaning that you are looking at the data and try to see what actually emerged from the data. So there's no need to link to any pre-existing coding frame or analytical perception. Yeah. And again, it's data driven, meaning that strongly linked to data, because whatever findings that you get would be emerging from the data itself. Okay. On the other hand, deductive thematic analysis can be analyst driven, meaning that what you see depends on the researcher or those who are analyzing the data, and everything have to be according to research question. So it's more like, okay, this is the question I asked, this is the answer that they give me. What can I see from the response is the answer to my question. Okay, so they don't really care that much in comparison about whether the data is rich or not. It's more whether the analysis can go detailed enough or not. Okay, so there is a predetermined specific questions and they will be looking for answer just for their questions. On the other hand, inductive one, you can actually emerge questions from the data, meaning that you don't know clearly what questions they are, or you did not cover a particular thing or topic, but then when you are analyzing the data, it actually just emerge, it just comes out. In that sense, it's totally acceptable for inductive thematic analysis. Okay, And in order to do that, you must be really familiar with data. That's why researchers read and reread the data for any themes related to the topic. Okay. But in deductive, researchers are interested in the way that the research question play out across the data. So there are things that focus on already and do not actually have much flexibility in this case. So both type is fine. Again, you use the method that is more appropriate to the research question that you're asking for. But the nature of the thematic analysis that we'll be talking today is mostly linked to inductive side of it, the inductive thematic analysis. Yeah, because you are deriving meaning from the data, and not really encourage you focus to laser focus on a particular topic or particular questions that you're asking. The other way that you can actually look at differences in themes is the semantic versus latent theme. This is what I mentioned earlier on as well. Semantic meaning that you only look at the superficial meaning, like whatever the word is actually spoken, the explicit meaning. So this is superficial or surface on the surface only. So it can be used to theorize the significance of the pattern, yeah, and their broader meaning and implication, typically linked to previous literature. So this means that you focus only on the actual meaning of the word uttered, and you want to compare it to previous studies. That's why like this is more relevant if you are running analysis like or research like group grounded theory research, where you are focusing on testing a particular theory to see whether they applies or whether they are valid or not. So you only focus on the semantic of the word spoken. On the other hand, the latent themes, in contrast, the latent theme is more interpretive. So we focus on how the researcher actually process the data. Yeah, and the idea is to extract underlying information such as ideas, assumptions, conceptualization, ideologies from the respondent's response. This means that it might be something that you is not really clearly spoken, but you need to derive like what is the seems to be the team that is agreeing or combining all the different responses together. Yeah, so identify features that provide the term themes with form and meaning. So this will involve some interpretive work. That's why some people argue that or criticize that it's being biased. Okay, so it's not only the focus on the description, okay, but it's already theorized at what you actually look at, etc. So it's actually linked to your research question itself. So by knowing what type of themes they are, let's actually look at the 6-step model to thematic analysis, again according to Brown and Clark. So you can see there are 6 steps where you actually follow. You can feel free to actually move back the steps, yeah, if you feel like it's not actually clear enough. So for example, first one is familiarizing yourself with the data. Yeah, this involves like reading and relating the data. Transcription is required. Then you jot down the initial one. Then you go and generate the initial code. This means you're already trying to look for things that it will summarize the different data. Yeah, so different excerpt of code or data. It seems like they are all talking about the same thing. That's the initial code. Then you actually combine and summarize the codes further on to form themes. Yeah, so this is a more overarching construct that will include all the different codes that you actually mentioned just now. Now, if you reach phase 3 and you feel like it seems like there's not enough teams, or it seems like everything is talking about the same thing only, did I actually make any mistake at the start or not, then you can feel free to actually go back to step 1 to restart the whole formalizing things, then generate the code again, see whether you arrive at the same conclusion, or you can actually get someone else to do it and then compare the results, see whether you are actually biased or not as a researcher. Yeah, you can actually go back again to any step as you go on, but you try to follow from 1 to 6 in general. Do not jump step. So phase 1 is familiarizing yourself with data. So if you're doing Jeffersonian approach, this would be quite straightforward. You already done it basically. Yeah. So data is provided in various ways. You need to immerse yourself in the data as a researcher, meaning that you actually go all in and you know every aspect of the transcript back and forth. Yeah, you're actually really familiar with it. If someone mentioned who say what, you are able to tell what page is it, like what part on the transcript. Okay, so it's recommended that you repeatedly read it, and you read it in an active manner, meaning that when you actually process the information, you try to extract the information or the meaning from it, not just like passively taking in the information only. You want to actively process it, see if there are any meanings or patterns and so on that you can extract, and make a note. Make a note first, doesn't have to go into coding first. Just make it, oh, this is what I see, or this is what I see. Yeah? Then see whether the meaning actually repeated itself. If they do, then you can actually change in the code in the next step. Okay, So ideally, the whole dataset should be read at least once from the head to the bottom before you do any coding. Sometimes it requires several reading even. Yeah. And from there, like, sometimes people actually separate their transcription afterwards into different code card or note card, yeah, where they actually note down the page or which is there from in order to do the initial code. Okay, this is an initial list of ideas or potential point of interest, particularly mentioned when they tend to repeat itself, or you find that it's really important, people really want to join in when you actually talk about that particular theme or topic. Yeah. So you organize the data or summarizing them into smaller chunks of meaning. Yeah, and the chunk will be the different code lah. They will identify a feature of the data, in this case the code or the excerpt. Yeah, and code is the most basic segment or element of your raw data that is meaningful in some way. Yeah, the data itself again in this case is not meaningful because you are not deriving anything that's underlying or things that combine them together. So you need to find that particular thing. That is the code. Okay, example is here. So a study by Clark et al. 2005. The extract is here. Is too much like hard work. I mean, how much paper have you got to sign to change a flipping name? No, I mean, no, I know. We have thought about it and cannot hear half-heartedly and thought, no, I can't be bothered. It's too much like hard work. So you can see this is actual conversation being transcribed in the word sound. It does not make a perfect, definitely not perfect grammatical sense. Yeah. So, but that is the correct way of doing transcription. So from there you can see that you can actually quote for he talk about the partner, the issue that he have. It means that it's too much hassle to simply change the name or too much hard work. Yeah? And it's from there, if it's repetitive, it seems like the participant don't like hard work. That seems to be the theme, isn't it? Like it's just too much work, I cannot bother. Another thing seems to be they are quite unhappy about work. Yeah, it's not that they are highly satisfied or they are happy about the work that they are doing. Those could be the code or theme. So some tips for thematic coding. You want to give a time limit for this, because for qualitative research, if there's no particular time, you would generate it until infinity lah. So cannot. You want to within a particular time, if given a few days or few weeks, you want to code as many possible potential pattern as possible. If they are repeated, that's fine. That's the idea. You want to see how many times the same code has been repeated, meaning that the extract or the response is actually talking about the same thing. Yeah, but you want to be diverse at within the time limit, as much things that you can discover, because you can always revise it later on. Yeah, code extract of data inclusively, meaning that each the same extract of data or the code can actually include multiple code. That is like the example shown just now that is totally fine. You can revise it later on if you feel like you should take away some code, or this is belonging to the same one, or even use a new code to actually encompass the multiple aspect of it. Yeah. And remember, there's no dataset without contradiction. There are always dataset that has contradiction, and people say different thing. Researcher or analysts do not actually agree what is actually the code. Yeah, and even the same person can say contradicting in the same session. Yeah, even when you're basically within the same session, they say two different things. One they say they agree, the other one they say they don't agree. Could be for different reason. Yeah, so it is totally fine. The key idea here is that when you are doing this, just let it flow naturally. Do not try to force it. I have heard stories where people, before they run a qualitative studies, already have an idea. These are the themes that I want to have. Then I find the quotes or extract they will forcefully put into under each of the theme. There's no way to do qualitative research. Because remember, qualitative research is supposed to be exploratory. It's not like I need to force it. Yes, it makes life easier if that is the purpose. Like you basically can force it given that it's already flexible, but again, there's not a proper way to do it and highly unethical in some sense. So that is coding. And once you develop your code, then you search for the themes. Again, this is the initial stage of searching for themes where you develop a themes that could be used in order to summarize the different codes or collate them together. Yeah, so it becomes a broader level construct. Okay, this is where the actual analysis starts. because now it requires more and more insight from the or interpretation from the researcher as to how do I combine this together. Sometimes the recommendation of doing is that like manually you can put down the name of each code along with like a brief description of what it means on different note card, and then just jumble them together on the table and just move around to see what can well combine with what. And then you by doing that, then you label them later on. You can actually represent this in the thematic mapping. So example is here that is given in a from a study that actually talk about how women talk about the vagina of femininity. Okay, so you can see here the coding is things like knowledge, empowerment, superior to penis. Yeah. Okay, satisfaction, yeah, those are the positive one. It seems like they're saying that it's not quite nice, they feel vulnerable, they feel embarrassed. These are the negative talk. So these are the code. This seems to be the themes that emerge from the code. So all these things are negative, all these things are positive. Yeah. And here is the lack of awareness. Seems like there are some awareness that takes make her aware, but typically they are not. Yeah, unless they are being killed and stuff. So there's a lack of awareness. Like this is the initial stage of team, where it comes from all the coding. Then once you actually have this, next step is to actually review them. So you are processing them even deeper level from here. Now you want to evaluate whether they are valid or not, whether you actually have repetition. Yeah. Now, how do you know whether a team is good? The pattern 1990s actually suggested that there are two factors or categories that you consider. One is internal homogeneity. So within the same teams, all the code should be quite coherent, meaning that they are supposed to point to the same thing, which is the team. Yeah. And outside of it, they should have external heterogeneity, meaning that each team should be clearly distinguishable from each other. They are really different, like the positive and negative one just now. It's clearly that it's different. Yeah. And a good team should have high score on both. Again, within the teams, each of the codes should be pointing towards the same thing. They're highly coherent. But outside of the team, they should be highly heterogeneous. They should be really different, so that it's really easy to tell they are different things. Even the code that's inside. Yeah. So once you actually have it, then you actually try to review, revise, or refine the teams if you do found that there are some inconsistency. Yeah, you do it at two levels. Again, firstly is the coded one. This is the internal homogeneity. Yeah, so all the extract within the team should form a coherent patterns. Yeah, if you do have the options of either reworking the team, renaming them, or discard them if you find that they are inconsistent code. So move it to another teams, or just discard it, throw it totally, or try to come up with a new teams that would actually collate or represent the whole set of code lah. Okay, it's really acceptable to just take away the code lah. You feel like it's no longer fitting in the model that you actually look at. You feel like it's no longer worth it to try to forcefully include it, or just come up with a new team that encodes it. Yeah, just create a new one. That's totally fine. Although the purpose as you go further and further down is to reduce the number of teams and code lah, to make the model more parsimonious. Yeah. Okay, but it's fine if you seriously feel like it's meaningful to add another one. That's totally okay. Okay, then after that you evaluate the model on a thematic mapping level right now. So it's in relation to the entire data set. Yeah. So it's like, do the theme itself relevant to the research question that you are looking at? Yeah, do they actually reflect the whole data set accurately? Like now you have the teams, you can actually go and read the transcript again, and you see whether it gives you a general idea that, oh, it's actually yes, like the whole transcript is actually talking about this. Yeah. Remember, coding and thematic reviewing is an ongoing process, so you can change and move around as you go. But you should stop when the map actually fit the data well. The data actually, the idea or the model actually fit the data well. There's no point moving anymore. So this is where the evaluation thematic level is important. Okay. There's no perfect model, by the way. Like, doesn't matter for quantitative or qualitative. You should stop when it's like sufficient. Remember, saturation and sufficiency. So at this step, you can see how it actually changed the model itself, like from something that's quite complex, all everything linked to each other, into something that's separated. Yeah, so three separated teams that are highly distinguishable between each other. This is actually more recommended. Again, it's something that's easier to process, and it tells the researcher that, okay, in the future, if I want to do something quantitative in regards to this particular topic, then I should focus on these three things. Okay. So then you can even go further by defining and naming teams. Like this one sounds weird, it's like something special that Bronze and Clark do. So once you actually have the model just now, you want to rename them. You do not want to follow the original name. Yeah, it can be for original name is fine, but they tend to try to name it into something that's more uh, how to say dramatic or eye-catching. Okay, the researcher interpretation here would play a big role. Again, like there are people who have different style of renaming their teams and etc. This is important because you want to make sure that the name of the teams actually have the features or have a nature of overarching narrative. So like first looking at the team without looking at our other codes, and then if you look at the data again, it seems like, oh, it is actually what the participant is trying to say. Like I totally agree with the researcher here. Then only you can say that you have a satisfying team from it. And remember, do not overload any single team by making it too complex. Like you try to include too many code in there, it doesn't work. In that case, you might want to actually separate out them. If you have so many codes under the same thing, it means that you have been too general. You don't want that. Remember, it should be distinguishable. And having distinct themes might be meaningful. So imagine if the topic talking about female talking about vagina just now, it can be just vagina. That one will encompass everything. But there's no point. It doesn't actually tell me anything, isn't it? So it should be like positive versus negative, like versus awareness. Then at least I know, oh, you can actually be look at this different thing. Yeah, these are the things that I need to focus on when I think about the particular topic. So when you're doing this, then you need to go through a detailed analysis of each of the teams, again similar to what you do in phase 4 when you evaluate them, but this one is trying to go again deeper, trying to make sure that the team actually is linked to each other, whether they are or not, whether they actually link to research question. Yeah, so make sure that there are minimal overlap. Like remember, the first one is overlapping each other, like all the crossing thing, but now you want to make sure that they are as parsimonious, as distinguishable as possible. You might have sub teams now rather than code, meaning that you have codes that combine into with each other and form a sub team, but they are not meaningful enough to be a separate team yet because they are still under a major team. Example is this. So from these three distinguishable, yeah, teams, they actually go into only two. So vagina is an asset, which is the positive talk, and vagina is a liability, which is a negative talk. Yeah, but you can see that they make it into something that's more dramatic lah and eye-catching. Yeah, you see, like instead of like his power is still there, satisfaction is still there, pleasure is still there. Yeah, but for negative one, they actually combine into a sub-theme like nastiness and dirtiness. Yeah, this one is when they actually talk about the not quite nice what men said. Vulnerability is still there, but they ignore the code already. You just have the sub themes of vulnerability. Yeah, but vulnerability itself is not large enough to be a separate one because it's still under the liability or the negative side of top. Yeah, so that's how they arrive into last one. And once you actually have this and you do feel like after several evaluation it fits the data quite well and it actually allow you to answer research question, then you go into the last phase, which is writing the report. Yeah, so here is where you conduct the final analysis and write up the findings. You will try to convince the reader of why the data is important, why the data is actually valid. That's the reason why you want to tell details or information regarding the design, why you make a particular decision when you are conducting the experiment. Yeah, try to tell a comprehensive story. Yeah, although you already summarize them into teams, but you still want to give a general idea of the story of the data itself. Yeah, the good storytelling is essential, yeah, for qualitative data presentation. So you want to support the prevalence of each of the team with enough data extract. So not just like one lah, give it like 3 to 5, depending again on the context or number that you have. If you're unable to generate like 5 extract to support one team, I don't think that is a valid one. So at least there should be that. Particularly you want to draw in extract that forms like a bit different sub teams and etc. So it makes a more interesting discussion and more interesting or more comprehensive storytelling. Yeah, so choose the data that are particularly vivid lah, and that would represent the essence of the team the best. Again, if possible, choose it from the one that actually represent the different sub teams or the code that is actually there. So we'll talk more about how do you write a qualitative research report for psychology in Unit 5. Yeah, that will be the end of Unit 4. I will see you in Unit 5.